Welcome to Performance Car Lounge, where each week we speak with enthusiasts selling their beloved performance cars. This week, we are speaking with the seller of a Porsche 911 996 GT3 Touring. Welcome everybody to the Performance Car Lounge podcast. Today with me, I have the owner of the car, Lachlan. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure.
So Lachlan, can you tell us a little bit about the car? I believe you've owned the car for about 10 years now.
Yeah, I bought it in December 2013. I've had the odd car now and then. The last one prior to that was a 454 Pontiac Parisian convertible, which was a bit of a fun car. And
Right.
I had a microbus, which wish we had kept that one as well. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So you owned a few varied cars. What was it that attracted you to the 996 GT3?
I actually bought it probably in the middle of the GFC, the global financial crisis, and I saw an opportunity to say, okay, well, a car like that GT3 might be an opportunity to buy because people might be realising it through doing it a bit tough.
Yes.
So I looked around and I saw the opportunity, and I did quite a bit of research, and that wasn't the first GT3 that I actually was looking at. It was another one, but this one popped up, and luckily it hit all the boxes for me in regard to it. You know, it's been cleaned. It's never had a prang. Never been in a panel shop, which was important for me. And
Especially with GT3s, as they are often used on track, and quite a number of them find the walls at tracks. And I'm a keen GT3 owner myself, and I can attest to the fact that sometimes they do find the walls on racetracks.
yeah, they do it. And I've checked around a few places in Melbourne that and everyone who's probably like yourself that has a GT3, not me, of course, but knows the history of the cars they're about. So I asked a few questions, and they said, "Look, it's straight. It's a good car," and so I continued on and ended up buying it.
Yeah, so you're the third owner of the car, and I believe the first owner of the car was the manager at the Porsche Centre in WA there, and then
Yep.
it was purchased by a businessman, as you say, who unfortunately had to part with it during the GFC, and that seems to be the way things go, isn't it? That when a financial crisis hits or there's hard times, the first thing to go are the toys. So if you do have the ability to pick up those toys at the right price at those times, it's often a very smart move.
Yeah, well, you know, no reference to any names, but you know, if you're in the game with GT3s and doing a bit of track work, you probably know the guy, but we won't mention it here. But
No, and it is a pretty tight community, and it's one of the things I love about the Porsche community. It is the ownership base. There's a lot of passion and support for each other out there. I referenced before that I've actually crashed a GT3 on track before, and I did it at a Porsche day, and it was one of the things I took from it was the amount of support I got from the community. And one of the things that you don't see these days is not a single photograph of that crash appeared on the internet anywhere. And to this day, I have never seen evidence of that online. So it is a close knit community, and it's good to keep it that way. And so when we look at the 996 GT3, it's really a watershed moment for Porsche. When they developed this car, Porsche were actually in financially hard times themselves. They had the 993 911, which was a very expensive car to build, and they weren't selling many of them, which obviously doesn't stack up to the greatest business case in the world. So with the 996, they looked to build a more cost-effective car. They moved to what they call the fried egg headlights, for want of a better term.
yeah,
And The base 911 shared some components with the cheaper Boxster headlights and some of the panels and even some of the engine components. So the purists at the time didn't think a lot of the 996 911, and there was a fellow by the name of Hartmut Christen, who in Germany, we could probably refer to him as the father of the GT3. So during this time, he proposed the concept of a homologated GT3 car to the Porsche board. So this would allow the GT3 to race in the FIA GT3 Cup. And somewhat surprisingly these days, he received a very lukewarm reception from the board. They were more into cost cutting, and they basically said you can do it, but only if it doesn't hurt the brand, which is a funny thing to think about now because without doubt, the GT cars from Porsche are the most desired cars in the Porsche lineup today.
Yeah, well, it's another thing that actually attracted me to the vehicle was the fact that it's a genuine touring model, and there was only 13 of them that came into Australia. And 13 is being our family lucky number. There's a lot of things happen around the 13th that adds a lot of strength to it. So that in itself added weight to me buying it,
Yeah,
thinking it down the track. Okay, well, this car should be worth something.
yeah, definitely. And there was only 13 touring cars, and out of the 90 cars I think they brought in the generation one. So we call this one the 996.1. It was the first generation of the GT3. Only five of them were brought in your color. And your color car is the iris blue metallic. So that makes it a bit rarer again.
Yeah, it's a sexy car too. Like the car when I bought it, it actually had a set of a sports exhausts as well, which I always leave on because it just sounds so nice.
So it's worth talking about that. It's powered by a 3.6 liter flat six, the Boxer Mezger engine. So that was the engine that was developed by Hans Mezger for racing. So that engine it was the GT1 race engine that they were able to homologate into the GT3. And they mated that up with the 996 GT2 gearbox, so, came out of that car. So another very race focused, performance focused car. So yeah, that all those bits came together to allow them to homologate this car. And it's actually gone on when you think about it. Not only did it race in that FIA series, but they've created their own category now with the Carrera Cup cars and the Porsche Super Cup, which continues to this day. It races in countries all around the world. Porsche Cup and the Super Cup even support the Formula One in a lot of rounds around the world. So it really was a watershed car for Porsche. And I think we're now starting to see a lot of people recognize this car as, the moment that Porsche changed direction in a lot of ways, and they're starting to appreciate in value.
Yeah, well, the price probably has checked a little bit back from sort of 18 months ago, but any Porsche was going mad. But a bit like everything, the situation, people are getting a bit tight on cash. But this vehicle, as I said, I've had it for 11 years now, and the roads around here just don't lend itself to having a good ride.
So,
We are in country Victoria, and anyone who knows the vehicle is only sitting about 50 mil off the road, and I've got to drive about 15 k's half the time on the wrong side of the road just to get into some decent road so I can take it for a bit of a track.
and that is one of the hallmarks of the GT3 is that they do ride very low, like they have a low ride height. The wheels are really fit up into the arches very tightly, like you can just barely fit a finger in between the tire and the wheel arch. And one of the things I love about the 996 GT3 is, its aero balance was such with that low ride height that on that biplane rear wing that it's got, you can see it's got a little ducktail spoiler on there.
Yeah.
And interestingly, you do see a lot of copycat GT3s going around on those 996s. Like the base model 996, 911s were obviously a lot cheaper to buy, and people were buying what they call the aero kit and fitting it to those base 911s. But as I understand it, those cars don't have that little ducktail spoiler, so it's a little tell that they don't have the genuine thing, obviously, as well as the badge too.
Yeah, and the as you say, like the probably the most valuable thing in the car is probably the engine and the gearbox. Um,
Yeah, I mean that engine is just something special. The Mezger engine it's water cooled, it's dry sumped, to really suit racing, and it's a long block. And that engine continued into not only the 996 generation 2, but also the 996, the 997 generations. There was two generations of the 997s as well.
yeah,
And there was even the it was even in its ultimate guise a 4 liter engine, which is probably the holy grail of GT3s for me in that 4 liter GT3 RS. But even into the 997s, the engine was still stamped with a 996 part number. So tracing all the way back to this original car that Porsche developed.
like the interesting thing that I find is that I very rarely let anyone else take it for a drive. But yeah, if you want to drive it hard, and you'd know it if you've been on track. I haven't been on a track, so if I get out on a bit of open road somewhere, and heaven forbid there's no police around, but
You're in the trust tree here. You can tell us all about it.
yeah, but you really need to drive it properly. You really need three hands. Like it's just unbelievable the power. If you want to go through the gears, like there's no flicking switches or anything. It's just a pure driver's car, and that's what I loved.
It absolutely is. It in today's numbers, it doesn't sound like it's putting out a lot of power. I think the Gen 1 996 was putting out about 265, 270 kilowatts or
Yeah,
something like that. But it's a light car, and it it really rewards good driving and smooth driving. And if you can keep that momentum up, it is just an absolute pleasure to drive. It's a really unique experience, and so much fun. I can remember the way I got into GT3s actually was back in about 2010. I was tracking a then very new R35 Nissan GTR that I had imported from Japan. And I was doing some super fast lap times in this car relative to my experience at driving on a track. And there was a couple of things that happened. I was out on track with some guys who I knew to be very good drivers, and they were saying to me things like, "Gee, you take an interesting line through turn three," which translates to your line's rubbish through turn three, but I was still going quickly. And um, the other thing I noticed was my car was braking all the time, and it was churning through tires and brakes at an alarming rate. And these guys in their GT3s were just pounding around all day long, and they were not missing a beat. So I
yeah,
thought, I can't continue pretending to be a good driver. I'm going to get one of these GT3s and see how good I really am. And I purchased a 2004 996 Generation 2 GT3,
yeah,
and I wish I'd held on to it because it was in the teal green metallic color, which at the time I think I got it for a bargain price because of the color, because it's quite unique and probably not to everyone's taste, but it was the only one that was brought into Australia in that color.
unreal. Yeah,
Yeah, and then I took it out to the track, and there was a few factors here, but I remember turn one at QR, it's quite a fast right-hander, and my first attempt at full noise at turn one ended up with me leaving the track backwards, and so did my second attempt. And what was happening there was I was not as good a driver as I thought at the time. I wasn't being smooth. I was being quite ham-fisted, and the car just punished me for not being smooth and not being precise. And
yeah,
it still retains a lot of that old Porsche personality where it's really counterintuitive, but if you're in a fast corner and you start to worry, the worst thing in the world you can do is lift off the throttle because the car switches on you in a
Yeah.
heartbeat.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
it's those type of traits that give cars real personality. But also in my defense, when I bought the car, it had tires on it that had a lot of tread, and I think they were actually the tires that came with the car. And they had plenty of tread on them, but they were 10 years old and they were hard as a rock. So I learned a few valuable lessons that day. But
Well, interesting on that is when I bought this vehicle, it wasn't far from Sandown down in Victoria in Melbourne. Of course, there's a Sandown track there, and the guy that had it before used to do the odd club day, track day. When I bought it, I'm 350 k's from Melbourne, and I drove it home, and it was light rain, and
yeah,
I drove it home on slicks.
wow. At the time, I don't know if you realized how brave a thing that is to do, because that's the other thing about the 996 that makes it unique today is the only driver aid that car has is ABS. There's no there's no traction control, there's no electronic stability control. Your right foot and your brain that are keeping you on the
Yeah.
road there and on slicks, that would have been a interesting drive in the wet, I'm sure.
Well, I didn't go anywhere until I put some new set of tyres on it. Yeah, it's fun car, but it's just time for me to move it on, and I've got it advertised. I've actually got some number plates with it, which I
Yeah.
can negotiate out as well, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, they're great plates. They say GT3 MK1, which
That's
is
right.
again another for anybody who's not watching the YouTube version of this podcast. I'll put all the photos of the car and all the information about the car on the performancecarlounge.com.au website. So from there, you'll be able to see all the pictures. I'll have the photo of those plates up as well. And we'll also provide a link through to the ad for the car where you can get in touch with Lachlan if you're interested in finding out more about the car.
Yeah, well, interesting. I've had some inquiry. Five of them are from people who actually own GT3s. It's interesting enough, and they just wanted to have a chat. And a couple that were actually looking to buy, but ended up buying ones that actually have been in a workshop or a panel beater. Thus, they were probably about another, well, they were quite a bit cheaper. When I say quite a bit, it might have been 60 or 70 grand cheaper.
This is the type of car that could well suit a collector as well. I've got a modern GT3 that has, the dual clutch gearbox and all the driver aids and rear steer. And I look back now at my first Porsche, which was that Gen 2 GT3, with a lot of fondness in how analog it was to drive. There's certainly a massive familiarity between my modern day GT3 RS and that original GT3, but there is a few little differences there as far as having that manual gearbox and not having traction control and the size of the car. Cars have gotten a lot bigger these days, and if I had a bigger budget, I'd love to have the original version of the GT3 as well. I don't think it's something that's going down in value. They're not making more of them. I often say that sort of thing. And I think time has, not done any disservice to the 996 Porsches in general. As we touched on before, when they were first released, they weren't the most considered to be the most beautiful cars, but over time, I think they've actually proved themselves to be quite attractive.
Yeah, well, I think they're pretty sexy looking car, and I don't give it a much. I drive it around the block, so to speak, which is about 15 k's, probably once a month. She's on trickle charge, but once a year I'll drive it to Melbourne, which is a 700k round trip, just to get it serviced out at a Porsche dealership.
Oh, so
And
which Porsche dealership are you taking the car to, Lachlan?
in Collingwood, in Melbourne.
And
I take it there, and then actually the last comment, a guy before I drive up, one of the the managers there said, "Well, God, this car's a keeper." That's what he said to me, which
Yeah.
was nice to hear. But you might say that to everyone too, of course. But yeah, it was nice to hear it.
No, no, it's definitely a special car, and they drive like no other, and it is definitely the start of Porsche producing something that gone on to be bigger than Ben-Hur. So not only did it spawn more generations of GT3, but we have then the GT2 and the
Mm.
GT2 RS and the GT3 RS and the RS cars. So they really did from this platform go on to produce something that there's probably changed the course of Porsche cars.
It's
Because
interesting, when I drive it, and if I'm driving to Melbourne, I've never ever been passed by so many cars. People just want to see what it is and overtake a Porsche,
and hopefully you get a
which
few.
annoys me a bit. But you just got to suck it up and let them go. But
Yeah, hopefully you get a few thumbs up on the way.
yeah,
But it's also unique that that flat six engine, and you touched on it before with it having some aftermarket exhaust on it. It's unique in sound and the way that those cars rev, past 8,000 RPM is just so inspiring. I love it.
well, I've got receipts on it from when the guy had it in Western Australia. That he actually put some steel synchros in, a GT3 sintered clutch. Oh yeah, the GT3 Motorsport crown wheel and pinion. So I've got the receipts for all that with the
Yeah,
vehicle.
it sounds like it's been looked after and loved for its life.
Yeah.
And how do you find insuring the car? Who do you insure the car through?
I insure it through Shannon's well, they're national, but I've got about 14 other vehicles, so they give us a pretty good deal. And I actually spoke to one guy that had a GT3, and he said, "Oh, he's got it insured for 130,000." I said, "Well, you're underinsured there," because I spoke to Shannon's and they kicked it up. It's a little bit less than what I've got it advertised for, but no problem at all. Because I've got other vehicles, it's a reasonable price, so they're not hitting me.
And it's good to know that when you buy a car as unique as this and parts aren't cheap and potentially that you can get insurance readily available. That that is sometimes a concern with more exotic cars. And the car you're advertising here, as we touched on before, is the touring model. So for those people who may not be as familiar with Porsche cars, with the GT3s, they bring out a touring model and they also bring out the Club Sport spec model. So the Club Sport spec is the same car and it's a no cost option, but they have a few options such as they put a half cage in it, they put a fire extinguisher in it, they put race Recaros with fireproof fabric on them as well. But ultimately, it's the same car. The Touring is just a probably more comfortable place to be on the road with leather seats, the lack of cage, but you're still getting that same powertrain. You're still getting the same brakes. You're still getting all the same, basically the mechanicals. The flywheel's different in the Club Sport spec cars. You get a single mass flywheel, which if you're driving it in traffic can make it a bit trickier to drive, and it also clangs and makes a bit of noise. It sounds like the car's
Yeah,
broken. So the touring cars are much better suited for back road country drives and commuting
yeah.
in around town. If you're not going to take your car out the track, the touring is definitely the one to have.
When I bought it, it actually came with a set of Recaro seats as well, which I've still got, and also um, a harness, like a seatbelt harness that straps onto the back underneath the back window.
Oh, and you still got those things. So are
Yeah,
they're included in the sale?
they're
So
all, they're all included in as well, and it's also got a set of springs for camper to adjust it. So when I brought it home, I took it. Last time I drove back to Melbourne, they just fitted the proper touring suspension to straighten up the wheels.
so back to the original spec. And
Back to the original spec, but have still got the other set of springs.
yeah, and to stop you just churning through tires
Yeah,
excessively. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
What we've got here is a first gen 996 GT3. And interestingly, this was the last road going car to be built on the Porsche factory motorsport production line after this car. So this car was built alongside all of the race cars. We know it's one of the great all-time 911s. It's the car that kicked off Porsche's most desirable lineage today. It's a low kilometer version. It's only got 77,000 odd kilometers on it. It's in pristine condition. Was only built in low numbers. They only brought in 91 in the Generation 1 and 13 of those Tourings. And in the Generation 2, they only brought in 90 cars, and that included the GT3 RS version. So that it's a very low volume model. And Porsche didn't think these cars were going to gain the popularity they did. They didn't even bother complying them for the US market. They thought they were going to have trouble selling these things. And as history has shown, the demand for Porsche cars is off the charts. Even if you've got the money to buy a GT car today from Porsche, you can't just go into a showroom and buy one. You have to have your name on the list and, normally wait a couple of years before you've got a chance of even buying one. So this is an excellent opportunity for somebody who is a collector of Porsche cars or wants to experience a Porsche GT car. So Lachlan, how much are you asking for this piece of it's a Porsche performance icon? How much are you
Yeah,
asking?
with the plates, it's 280,000. And I would option out the plate. I've actually got the plates advertised on another website to sell separately, and I've had a few offers, but nothing like I'd probably negotiate out the plates for about 30 grand.
Oh, okay. So potentially someone could pick this car up for around the 250K mark if they didn't
That's
get it.
right. Which is pretty good value for a unique vehicle. Well, it's
Yeah.
good. I reckon it's great value.
Oh, 100%. And this is a car that's been looked after its whole life. It's like I said, it's a Porsche performance icon. So if you are interested in this car, head to the performancecarlounge.com.au website. You can see all of the photos of the car, and you can click on the link to the ad of the car and get in contact with Lachlan. Thanks for joining us at Performance Car Lounge. If you have a performance car with an interesting story that you are selling, contact us at performancecarlounge.com.au.